relatively new in the class, and his dad was taken to the hospital when 10 days ago, and just having it's going downhill, just really struggling. They can't figure out what's going on, and so I want to ask you to pray for Dave. His dad, it's especially tough time in the holidays to kind of get this figured out. Does have cancer, but not sure that's part of what's going on right now. So we need to be praying. And then Pat, he brought what did you bring? Pat brought 8 for the late. Here we go. Okay, 8 books, and still a great deal. 1 for 10, 2 for 20. And but Pat will be available to sign those afterwards. And it's a great book. It's been a great read. I've thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the names I'm very familiar with. So very good. And then before we get started, I just wanted to thank you for. I'm just blown away with your generosity toward the Title I Spring Lake School. Everything that we collected over those weeks, it's been it's really been so life changing for so many of these families that are struggling. But when Lorena said, some gift cards to help folks get, food and stuff for the holidays from Publix or Aldi's or what have you would really be helpful. And I never would have dreamed that you would have done. You did, and you can do the math on this, between the cash that you gave me and the purchase of the $25 cards, that total came to over $1,000. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And talked to Lorena. She got a lot of those out before the kids finished last week. And then she got a few more out Monday, Tuesday while she was still working to some of the families. But she still has some. And she said, but just trust me, Jimmy, I run into families who have need for food every day. So whatever few cards are remaining, they'll be given out in time to meet the needs of families. So thank you for your generosity and what have you. It's just when I got home, I started I felt like a money changer in the temple. Just kind of counting. Linda said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Honey, it's grocery money. It's wonderful." And so I just kind of kept counting. And then somebody had given me an envelope that I really thought was a Christmas card or something. So I didn't open it then. And then later that afternoon, I thought, well, I'm going to open it and see what it is. And it was, a handful of cards, more cards on it. So it was just, it was really, really amazing. And, thank you, so much for your generosity. It's really meeting some serious needs. Okay. Hey, a few things as normal. If you're a guest this morning, please reach out to me. So I'll know you're here and I'll have some contact information on you, but welcome. We're glad to have you. Did any of you come Friday afternoon, evening, or last night to the festival? Any of you come? We came last night. Len and I brought our 2-year-old granddaughter. We got here about 7, and she just had a blast. She just had a blast. It was crazy. Well, maybe me more than Linda, but we were physically exhausted. It was just crazy fun. It really, really was, between the outside area and then the stations area downstairs with the face painting and the balloon design and what have you. So it was really, really cool. I talked to a couple of staff folks that it was the first time, and it really exceeded expectations. It really did, and so I thought it was very good. And again, I don't know that my opinion matters, but I did say, what, this is wonderful and a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll reach a lot of people. But I said, I wish the message of Christmas had been stronger. May I say that? It was there. It was there, but I don't want to go look for it. Okay, I want it to be evident. Okay, who we are and where we are, what have you. But again, just my humble opinion, anyways. For what it's worth. Okay. Join us on social media. Just got to be careful. Facebook at Journey LG, or I would really love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Somebody was asking me this morning about a message that I had done. Frankly, I've done it twice in here over the years on the Judgment Seat of Christ, and all of that's available on YouTube. Okay. Just go there and search, and you should be able to find it. And then just a reminder, we're we're coming up on 5 months for the Israel trip, and kind of the last call. I'll find out from the tour company. I'm going to wait till after the first of the year exactly where things are and exactly what a drop dead date would be. I had somebody catch me yesterday, say we're interested in signing up. We're going to be out of the country for 2 or 3 months. And I said, well, you better sign up before you go if you're going to do that. So there's some brochures on the table. And then next is be working on your word. I told you I got mine. January 8th, when we resume, I'll do my word, and hopefully you'll have one. If not, when it comes to the sharing time, just make one up, and so you won't be embarrassed. And then schedule-wise, I want just again to remind today we're going to finish up the study of the Beatitudes. No class the next 2 weeks, and I think worship in the big house is 1:10 a.m. service. For the next 2 Sundays, but this next weekend, the candlelight is at Christmas Eve, 3:30, 5:30, and then 10 a.m. on Sunday. Those are all identical, as I recall. So, and then we resume January 8th with my word. Just a second, back up, Walter. And then I'm going to begin a new series on January the 15th, and I have decided, I kind of played with it the last week, we're going to continue through the Sermon on the Mount. Okay. And I told Linda, I think I may have mentioned to you, I really want to try to finish it by Easter. And the more I got into it, the more excited I got about it, to be honest with you. And we're not going to be done by Easter. Okay, let me put it that way. But you remember, it's almost 3 chapters, so it's a lot of information. And boy, it really gets down to the nitty gritty of Christian living. And I can't believe in all the years of my study and teaching, I had not ever done a series on this Sermon on the Mount. So I'm really looking forward to it. But we're going to probably be in it at least maybe through April, maybe even into May as we begin to walk through. So I want to encourage you to start reading Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and to start making your way through that in the days ahead. Okay, open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. Okay, we have been, this is number 10, and making our way through the keys that lead to a blessed a life of contentment and satisfaction and fulfillment. Not problem-free, okay, but able to journey our way through the difficulties that life that throws at us, and it does. It's just part of being in a fallen world. But embracing these right keys can unlock more of that sense of contentment and fulfillment in our lives. And today we're going to pick up with verses 13 to 16. But since this is kind of the last time on the Beatitudes, I want to read just kind of read them all to refresh our memory on what they say to us, and then I'll read the verses for today, and we'll relook at the order. But this is the longest sermon that we ever recorded of Jesus, and it's probably the most familiar. But the more I study this, I think not just the longest and the most familiar, maybe the most misunderstood. Maybe the most misunderstood of Jesus' teachings. I mean, he just launches into these Beatitudes with just full of just blessings and promises for us. And when I begin to read and reread, it's one of the things I do when I'm preparing for something. I just read the same text over and over and over and over and over again. I may read it in different translations and just read it over and just kind of get it, fixed in my mind that these are some of the most challenging words and all of the teaching ministry of Jesus about we tend to focus, because I think there's some legalism and Pharisaism in all of us, including myself. We tend to get too hung up on what we do and what we don't do. And I think if we gave more attention to the attitudinal inside part of the faith, then probably more of what we do would be more consistent and would be done for the right reason. And so it's pretty powerful. But anyway, the Beatitudes, seeing the crowds, just folks that were curious. When you heal people, when you teach like Jesus did, you can get up a crowd. You can put up a tent and folks will come. he went up to the mountain. There's a lot of similarities here between what happened. If you go back to Moses and the giving of the Ten Commandments, there's some similarities between the context here. And when he sat down, which was normal for a rabbi, the disciples, more to the committed folks that were genuinely seeking to follow him, he opened his mouth and he taught them. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive or obtain mercy. And then verse 8, we looked at a few weeks ago, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. That's about integrity. And then 2 weeks ago, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. And then in verses 10 to 12 last week, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So with that context, let me read now verses 13 to 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled on under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Look at the order again, and I think this just kind of happens to be maybe the way I approach things. This whole series on the Beatitudes has just, at least I formulated in, there's some roots. Recognizing your spiritual bankruptcy and your inability to do anything on your own to get right with God, and then be broken, mournful, and repentant of the sinful condition which we're in, and then be meek, submit your will to His will, and seeking to do what He wants you to do, not what you want to do. And that leads to a life of relentless pursuit of hungering and thirsting after righteousness. There are results or fruit from that light, which is we're more merciful, we're more forgiving, we're less judgmental, we don't have bitterness, we don't harbor bitterness against others, that we're realizing that we have been forgiven a debt that we could never pay, and now we're going to forgive others because that's a debt they probably could repay. Pure in heart, a life of integrity, especially that there's consistency on the inside and the outside. And then that leads to a life of being a peacemaker. But the consequence of this kind of life leads to persecution. I shared with you last week, we'll be in here for a little over an hour, and every 5 minutes, someone on this planet who loves Jesus died for their faith. They were martyred. And I don't know that I'll ever forget that. I didn't realize it was that much. And you got to remember, as I shared with you, the numbers are hard to get a hold of, but that number of every 5 minutes is, at least in my view, the lowest, that 5 every minute. Could be much more, could be twice as much. So it's huge. But when we get to verses 13 to 16, I didn't find anybody that I read or researched that included these verses about being salt and light as a part of the study of the Beatitudes. But the more I looked at the context of what Jesus was saying, and I looked at that, this is what it means to live a godly life. And if you live that way, there's a downside, there's a negative side, there's a difficulty side, there's a persecution in all forms side. I'm just not sure that this next section is the flip side of the consequence. Yes, there is a price to pay if you're going to follow Jesus. Most of us will never have to pay any price whatsoever other than somebody maybe making a little bit of fun of us. But there's an upside here. There's a positive side in terms of the possibility of making a difference. Most of us, though we've not probably thought of it this way, most of us live our lives with a fear of not mattering. We are afraid that we come, we are born, we live, we trust Jesus, we try to follow him, we come to the end of our days, whatever those days are, and we die, and we hope that our lives made a difference. But often the true impact of our time on earth is not fully known while we're here, but after we're not here. And we won't know that. That's why I've said to you more than once, I said that even last week, my aim for years has been less about building an inheritance to leave behind for my kids and grandkids and more about a legacy of who I wanted to be in my relationship with God, and people remembering that versus stuff that's left behind. And then when we come to these verses here, it's really how to have a positive influence on the people around you. So we're going to, this is, I told Linda, I said, it's a conflicting teaching where Jesus says, this is our responsibility. But at the same time, I realize most Christians I know don't take this responsibility seriously. I think the problem of the local church today, ours included, is the problem of most Christians, because the church is made up of believers. And that is, and I don't know all of the reasons. I think some of it has to do with the world squeezing us and us not wanting to be made fun of and mocked and what have you. But I can't give you a date, but at some point, most Christians and churches hid in the closet. And societally, we're paying for that now. And I'm not so sure that it is reversible, at least in my lifetime. Maybe it is perhaps for the next generation. But what Jesus is going to talk about is every Christian's responsibility. And yet when I look at the lives, I've done a lot of funerals of folks that were great Christians, some that I'm not sure were Christians, and some, if they were, they weren't much of one. But the tragedy of the lives of most Christians and of most churches is that they have basically become, when it comes to making a difference and having an influence, is that they're basically inconsequential, or maybe a better word is they have become irrelevant. The world just tolerates us now. Not much respect, really. A little bit here and there out of the marketplace, perhaps, but generally speaking, we're just kind of tolerated. And I think a lot of that is our fault, in the sense that we just continue to give ground and not take a stand on issues, and we just lost control. And I can't think of any place in our society, from families to the marketplace to government to education. I can't think of any venue that's not in trouble, just struggling. And I think a lot of it is because we have, compromised. Our relationship to this world is, when I say the world, I'm not talking about the physical world. I'm talking about kind of the system and the thinking of this world that is opposed to God and opposed to anyone who wants to follow God. That's what I'm talking about. And our relationship with the world should not be confusing to us. We may not like it, but it should not be confusing. We are called to be in the world. There's no other place to be unless we're dead and in heaven. We are called to be in the world. There's got to be some reason from the moment you and I said yes to Jesus, he did not take us to heaven. He left us, and he left us with responsibility. And I think we're failing at that miserably, and self-included. And that failure to influence in a positive way has brought us to where we are. We are to be in it, but not of it, not absorbed into it. And let me get there are three verses here. I'm going to show you each one of these. First, in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17. Next slide, please. Do not love the world. Can it be any clearer than that? Okay, but boy, do we. I mean, we do. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of God is not in him. That's a frightening statement to me. You can't love God and the world at the same time, is what he's saying. For all that is in the world. He describes, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the lust of that, and the pride of life. Next slide, please. Is not from the Father, but it is from the world. The world has a set of desires and appetites that are so contrary to the desires and appetites of God and knowing him and doing his will. And John is right. And remember, the world is passing away, slowly but surely. We know as believers, we know the end of the story. Why don't we live that way? I mean, we know how it ends. And yet we live as if we're going to lose. It's passing away along with his desire. But whoever does the will of God, who relentlessly pursues God and his plan and his will for their life, lives that kind of life, abides and lives forever. And then Paul in Romans chapter 12 in verse 2 says, don't be conformed to this world. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. The world does everything it can to suppress our witness for Christ. We'll see the metaphors in a minute. To not shine and to not shake the salt. Don't do that. It's offensive. Just be a nice person, but don't talk about Jesus. But be transformed. Don't be conformed. Be transformed by the renewal of your heart and your mind, your attitudes and your actions, that by testing, you may discern what is the will of God. And the God's will, it's always good, it's always acceptable, and it's always perfect, but not always easy. Okay? And then one more. In James chapter 4, verse 4. You adulterous people, don't answer it out loud, but in your mind. What do adulterous people do? Okay. Do I need to unpack that for anyone? No. We know exactly, okay? Okay. What he's talking about here from the sexual context is, James is writing, we've got too many of God's people in bed with the world. And that's damaging to the influence. Damaging. Earlier in James 1, he said, do not be stained by the world. Okay? You know that friendship with the world is enmity with God. God hates our friendship with the world. And as John said, love not the world. Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. That's sobering. Sobering. But not taken seriously enough, I think, in most of our lives. So, two facts about the world that kind of sets up where we're going in verses 13 to 16. This world is decaying and needs salt. Salt is a preservative. And next, this world is dark and getting darker. And it needs light. And Jesus, it's the only time in the Sermon on the Mount, he takes these very common areas of life, salt and light. I mean, we live with it every day. Every day, they're part of our lives. Salt and light. And he's using these to help us to understand how can we make more of a positive have more of a positive influence in a world that is dark and decaying and doesn't want us to shine or to shake. Doesn't. So how can we make a difference? And in these few verses, I think there are three insights, from the words of Jesus that kind of help us pull this together. First, we must recognize that we have influence. Look at the verses again in verse 13. Okay, you can become the salt of the earth. You can become, verse 14, of the light of the world. Is that what it says? He says what? It's who you are. It's not something you become. It's something that you are when you come into a relationship with Christ. I brought Morton iodized salt. How beneficial is this in the container? Okay. Do you know what the expiration date is on salt? Only if it's iodized. There's no expiration date. We are this. Now, whether or not we're effectively are-ing this, I don't know. It's not good English, but it may be good theology. Is we are this. We don't become this. We are this, and it's who we are individually and who we are collectively. Especially, you might say, as a local church. And the verb tense here is present tense continuous action, which means you are and you must continue to be salt and light. You are, because that's who you are. And then this light, I love this little light. Somebody sent me this light. It is blinding. Okay, this will light up my whole house. This is unbelievable. Okay, I got that as some junk mail, and I kept it. The other thing about it says in the verse, you. It's emphatic. You know what emphatic means? You and you alone. It's like Jesus saying, "Listen, I got one plan. You're it. I got one. You're it. Okay, you are this and you are that. I don't know if you're going to be effective at that. Yeah, I'll energize you. I'll fill you. I'll be there for you. I'll watch over you. I'll get you through difficult situations. But this is who you are. And if you don't live that way, the plan's not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's not going to be lived out. So we are, understand that. We are salt and light. We're not becoming that. We became that the moment we trusted Jesus, and we spend the rest of our lives becoming more effective at being both in our journey. The second thing under here I want you to notice is that everyone has influence. Everyone has influence. I was reading this week that sociologists say that the most introverted person, and by the way, they are not in the room for obvious reasons. They're introverted, most introverted. They have an influence of the most introverted of approximately 10,000 people. And that's the most introverted. Okay, I've got people in this room that are on the other end of the spectrum in terms of extroversion. Okay, and most of us kind of somewhere in the sweet spot here in the middle, and probably much to your surprise, I'm a little bit, naturally me, I'm a little bit more toward the introverted side of my life. So everybody has it. The average individual has somewhere between 6 and 9 close friends. Now, we got a lot of acquaintances, but close friends, sociologists say. So, if you begin to multiply those friends and those families and their kids and their connections, what have you. So, thousands of people you and I have been entrusted. Aren't you glad God didn't use the salt of the earth and the light of the world? He didn't give you and me the whole world and the whole earth for which to be responsible. He just entrusted a little bitty part of it. Said, I'm going to give you some influence. And all I'm asking you to do is to be salt and light, be effective in whatever little part of the world that I have entrusted to you. But recognize you have influence. All of us do, much more than we every dream that we have in terms of and influence. And then kind of last in this recognizing is, though we are salt and light, basically we are reflections of a source that's in us. Does that make sense? Interestingly, God is defined in Scripture. There are only 3 times where it says God is. God is. It says that God is holy, that God is love, and that God is light. That's how God is defined in Scripture. God is loving and God is holy. He hates sin, but he loves the sinner. And God is light, wanting to shine, his presence and to invade the darkness and season a decaying world with the presence of his people at work, at home, in the neighborhood, at the marketplace, wherever we are, to make a difference with our lives. And a couple in John chapter 8, in verse 12. In fact, I did a teaching when we did the I am sayings of Jesus in John chapter 8, and in verse 12, Jesus spoke to them, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We are, I guess, shining, as it were, for him. And I have one other I want to do in Philippians 2:15. Philippians 2:15. Verse 15. Verse 14. Do all things without grumbling and complaining, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. I mean, that's the responsibility that all of us hold as followers of Christ. I'm thinking this morning, my mind was, we kept our granddaughter last night, which was is a blessing and always a sleep deprivation. This morning is to be salt and light. You don't need a BS, that's a Bachelor of Salt. And you don't need a DL, that's a Doctorate of Light. You just need to be a Christian. That's it. And I assume we all qualify in that. So the first thing we need to recognize is that we are salt and light. Secondly, we must exercise that influence. We have to do something with it. This is no good in the shaker. It just isn't any good. And this is no good not on, not penetrating darkness. They're no good. And we'll talk about the warnings in both of these in just a minute about if you're not shining and you're not shaking, then you're not, sharing your value. I added, the last 2 or 3 days, I got to thinking, how are salt and light, what do they have in common? I don't have any of this on the PowerPoint. I just thought, but I think it's important. We need both salt and light to sustain life. There is a condition when there is a deficiency of salt that can lead to death. And there are, I've never lived in Alaska, don't plan to live in Alaska, but like to take a cruise one day, but only momentarily. And I want to do that in the summer. But, there are months that you live in darkness and there's no light. Okay. But in the igloos, in the homes of those who live there, there are lights that they turn on because they're necessary for their own well-being and health. We have to have light. We have to have light and we have to have salt. And the life that Jesus is talking about here, and we talked about this before, is not bios, physical life. Every person existing has that, but it's Zoe. It's the life of God in the soul of man and woman. So those are, they have that in common, that both are necessary to sustain life. Secondly, both are necessary to purify and to heal. To purify and to heal, to keep clean. The reason is you and I have a spiritual condition that contaminates to the deepest core, and that's sin. And salt and light purify and heal from that sinful condition. And then they're also alike in that both of them are effective because they penetrate. Salt penetrates, let's say, the meat that it's seeking to season or preserve, and light penetrates the darkness. Both salt, think about the meat, think about the dark room. When the salt is shaken onto the meat and the light is turned on, change has taken place as a result of the presence of salt and light. So first, we must shake the salt. That's kind of the invisible influence, whereas light is a little bit more. It's amazing if you Google how many uses is there for table salt. There are over 14,000. Over 14,000. In the word salt here is translated in English is theon. Theos is God. The word literally means divine. Divine. Salt in Jesus' day was a precious commodity. It was used as a preservative, but it was also used to pay debts or to pay salaries. In fact, the Roman soldiers were paid in salt. The Latin word for that is salarium, and we get our word salary from it. Okay? So when someone says he or she is not worth their weight in salt, it means they're not worth the money we're paying them, is what it means. During the Civil War, there were tremendous battles over control of salt mines, especially up in the West Virginia area. And you know why? Is control of that salt mine really meant control in two critical areas. Without salt, meat could not be preserved and feed the troops. And without food or the presence of hunger, it's really difficult to wage war. But secondly, salt was used to cure leather, and leather was used to make shoes. What kind of a soldier will you be without food and without shoes? Not good for long. Not good for long. So it's valuable. It preserves and it seasons that whichever it touched. So here's a little bit of a warning that we can't change what we are. We're salt, but we can waste it through being isolated or being contaminated with other minerals and substances. Okay? I'm going to show you a painting. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but this is Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. Painted it over about a 4-year period, 1496, 7, 8, right in there. It's a world famous painting, as you're familiar. And it's got the 12 disciples in it. You see Jesus in the middle. Okay, but to his left, the face kind of in the background is Thomas, and then in the green that's James. And then just and the other some of the lesser known disciples. You come to the right and you see the right of Jesus. It looks like a woman, but it isn't. That's John. Okay, that's John. And then next to him is Peter. Again, the three of the inner circle were Peter, James, and John. Those are the ones closest to Jesus. But right in front of Peter, you see the beard and the black head. That's Judas. That's Judas. Okay? Now, what you may not can see from where you are is right here. Huh? No. Salt. The salt in the container knocked over, which was horrific waste in Jesus' day. It was an act of shame to misuse, to abuse, to toss salt. Isn't it ironic that Judas was the one who knocked over the salt. Isn't that amazing? Because he wasted his opportunity. For whatever reasons, I don't know, greed or hoping to usher in a different, as it were, kind of kingdom. But he spilled the salt, which was a shameful act. We must shine. We must shake the salt. Next, we must shine the light. This is a little bit more visible influence. Look at the text. 2 examples. Like a city set on a hill, you can't miss it. Like a lamp on a stand, they're easily seen. You can't miss those. Their presence is so easily seen. It's hard. I had this when we lost power back in one of the hurricanes. And I am telling you, I turned this thing on. It was so powerful, and set it in the center of the room. It lit up the entire room. I just wish I had about 6 of them to light up all the other in entire rooms. And it was powerful in penetrating. As I shared with you last week, light is who we are, but the world hates light. It loves the darkness. And we live in that conflict, being in the world but not of it, being salt and being light, and realizing the meat of the world doesn't want to be preserved, doesn't want our seasoning, and definitely doesn't want our light. And yet that's who we are, and that is our responsibility. Not to fulfill that responsibility leads you into inconsequentiality and irrelevance as an individual believer and as a church. It's always easier to compromise in a weekend than it is to stay strong and to stand up. Always. And then in verse 16, Jesus really personalizes this down in verse 16 when he says to us, in the same way, let your light shine. That's a command. Let your light shine before others. If your light shine, do your part. Whatever world God's entrusted to you. And I'm just telling you, just thinking over the next weekend, folks coming in, folks going out, mostly family, some friends. Some know the Lord, some don't know the Lord. Some walk with the Lord is just questionable. And what a great opportunity, because you may not see those folks again for another year, and you may not see some of them if they got itch ever again. And yet the opportunity, it's going to be right in front of us for the next week to do that. But will we be effective? We're there. We're salt and light. I'm here. But will we shake and will we shine? And that's a personal choice. And how do we shine? Hear the result. And let them see your good works. Let them experience, not perfect works. We don't have those. But your good works. Good works are attractive and believable and solid. It's a beatitude kind of thing that we've been talking about all the way along. Serving. I saw a number of you serving at the festival last evening. And I know you serve in so many other areas. Those are ways that people are seeing your good works. And what you did with the school, though none of us would probably ever walk into that school, the giving of both the commodities and of the cards has a spiritual influence in it, because the school, and I told Lorena, my one condition in helping meet this need is you make it unmistakably clear that this is coming from a Christian group. A Christian group. Make sure they understand. And if they don't want it because of that, then we won't do it. But I want them to know it's coming from a group of Christians. And she did. They were very, as I said, very gracious. So service and generosity and compassion, all those kind of things is what you did. And I think that's a way to do that. But it's also a way to kind of do it behind the scenes. It was safe. It was safe. And the motive is for God to be glorified, to make his name known, not ours, in the passage. So the salt, again, if it's not iodized, salt doesn't have an expiration date, but it can get contaminated and become useless. Or it can remain, as it were, in the shaker and never get out and have its impact. The same thing's true with the light. we can put the light, I could take a hat or a piece of paper and turn this light on, but cover it up. Doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good at all. And that's a warning. So let me wrap up with how can we maximize this influence that we are and that we have as salt and light. Okay, I just got 4 suggestions, 4 tips. Number 1, don't hold back. Don't hold back. Get out of the salt shaker. Turn on the light. Be intentional about it. If there's no contact, there's no influence. And you're going to have opportunity, most of us, to be around either non-believers, questionable believers, away from the Lord believers, and then those who are following Jesus. And it's a great opportunity. Okay, great opportunity that dozens of us in the room need to squeeze and take advantage of it. But I will, going back to last week, I will say this: when God gives you influence, the enemy will give you attention. There's a price to pay. I'll admit it. Okay, but we talked about it. But we've got to, I guess, fulfill our responsibility. So don't hold back. Number 2, don't overdo it. You ever put too much of this on? Yeah. If I were to ask you to come up here and stand in front of me and I were to do this, you're gonna say, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's too much salt, too much light is not good. And as I have alluded to the fact that I think as believers, we've been too irresponsible in not shaking salt and shining the light. I think there has probably been equal damage, though well-intentioned on the other sides, when in an effort to influence for Christ, we gave them too much salt and we blinded them with the light and turned them off. Both of those are problematic in terms of us having a positive influence. Over in 1 Peter chapter 1 Peter 3, 1 Peter 3 and verse 15, Peter writes, always be prepared to make a defense, an apologia, a defense to anyone who calls to account the hope that is within you. Always be willing to give a reasonable testimony of transformation and change as a result of your relationship with Christ. People want to know, not are you a Christian? They want to know, does it matter? Does it make a difference in how you live? Not just in where you're going. And I think if we better spoke the life change that takes place in the now, we might find folks more open to receiving the gift, not just waiting on the hope of the gift. Probably one of the most, because I'm around a lot of people and mostly believers, not all, and asking them, it's become a frequent, okay, what difference does your being a Christian make in this life? And I'm amazed at how difficult it is for a Christian to express the answer to that question. They always want to go to the future, to the hope side. And that's real. Yeah, I'm going to die and go to heaven. That's very real. Okay, but if that was the only incentive for becoming a Christian, then, Jesus should have taken us to heaven the moment we said yes. He left us behind for a reason. For a reason. So we got to be able to give an account of the hope. Why in the world are you a follower of Jesus? And we have trouble articulating the answer to that in the present, in the now. What difference does Jesus make in your life today that if he weren't present in your life would be missing? That's what people want to know. That's a spiritual conversation people are willing to have. They're not after, well, I'm going to heaven when I die. Well, they're not even sure they believe in the afterlife. Well, I go to church every Sunday. Okay. That's the last thing they want to do. Okay. Well, I believe the Bible's the word of God. They don't care. They want to know, what difference does that make in your life today? And therefore, why should I be interested? And Peter is saying, be able to give an account of that for the hope, but do it with gentleness and reverence. Okay? Not too much. Not too much. Earn the right, which kind of moves into the next thing, and that is do build trust. Now, if you're if you're on a plane, or you're in a kind of a quick place in a line or something like that, you don't have time to build trust. You don't know the person, but most of the relationships you and have in life are developed, and what earns us the right to share is the building of trust, and that trust is trust is the result of connecting with people, and connection requires knowing people. And to really know someone requires transparency and vulnerability on their part. So it's kind of like a sequence. If I'm going to really build trust with someone and earn the right to share with them the difference that Jesus makes in my life, then the first and foremost things, they need to know that I'm a flawed sinner, not that I've got it all together as a Christian, because I don't. That's transparency and honesty and openness. It's a struggle. Sometimes, and maybe some of you as well, sometimes I think it would be easier not to live for Jesus than to live for Jesus. Because there is no price to pay not to live for Jesus in this life. No price. Is the transparency, because the lost people judge us wrongly in assuming that we think we have it all figured out and have it all together and that we're close to perfect. And we all know that's not true. Far from it. And that's one of the reasons we need Jesus in this life. He doesn't fix me up where I'll be perfect. He just fixes me up where I can live with the imperfections. And then that transparency, people get to know. Okay. I've had, and again, there's been a real transformation in my life in the last 10 to 15 years, and a good transformation in my life. And I've had people come up to me after this class and say, I don't know that I've ever met a Christian that was so honest. And I thought, so you're thinking about Christians that are all a bunch of liars. Maybe we are. Or at least we've led them to a wrong assumption, okay? And then last, whatever influence you have, steward it well. There is a principle in Scripture that cuts across finances and everything else, including influence, and that's this, okay? If you're faithful in little, He will entrust you with more. If you're not faithful in little, He won't. Why would He? So steward well whatever little influence that you have, whatever little influence it is. Do it well. Be willing to speak up. Be willing to give an account of the hope that's within you. Be willing to shake the right amount of salt. Be willing to shine the right amount of light. Taking advantage of the opportunity. Our responsibility is to deliver the message, not to get a response for the message. That's up to the individual. But we need to put them in the position of having to make a response by giving, as it were, the message. Okay. So my question to close is this: who needs your influence? When you go to that family meal, when you go to that friend's house, or you get in a car or a plane, and you end up in the family room, the living room with these people, most of which I'm sure you know well, and what have you. Who needs your influence? Be intentional. Think about it. Don't pray for opportunity. It's always there. Pray for courage to see it and to step into it. And that's different. It's always there. Just being willing to step into it is important. Okay. I showed you the salt and I showed you the light, but this is Dash. You know what Dash is? Fake salt. Salt free. Fake. Fake salt. I'm not sure we don't need to give some of this to a lot of folks who know Jesus. Okay. They're Dash Christians. That's your quote for them. Dash Christians. Okay. I don't want to be a Dash Christian. Okay. And, but there's somebody out there waiting on our influence. And there could be a price to pay in it. I get it. But we've got to be willing. If we're going to affect any kind of a change in this world that's going downhill fast, then you and I, as salt and light, are just simply going to have to do a better job of living a beatitude kind of life. Amen? A couple of questions. What good works should others see in a salty, shining Christian? And then what are some ways we can dilute our saltiness and diminish our light? Father, thank you for this study in the Beatitudes. It's been so encouraging and so uplifting and positive with the blessings that you promised. But there's this responsibility and expectation that goes with every one of them. But it's in so living that way, yes, that we invite from a dark and a decaying world, mockery, disdain, maybe even hatred, persecution, verbally, maybe physically. And yet the other side of that is increased opportunity to make a difference and to have influence, to shake the salt and to shine the light effectively. We are those, but be effective at doing those. And Lord, I pray as we move into a new year in front of us, that for me is one, that I would step into those opportunities better than I ever have before, and to appropriately following the leadership of your Spirit to the best of my ability, just to shake the appropriate amount of salt and to shine the appropriate amount of light, and then leave the results with you. Bless the time now in conversation. Lord, I pray for these folks that I love and those that are watching. You give us a wonderful, wonderful Merry Christmas. And as always, help us to remember the reason for the season, and that's you. It's not the stuff. It's not the gifts. It's not the food. It's not just the family time. Those are fun things, yes. But it's about focusing just for a short period of time on your coming to give us a way out. And we're grateful for that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. All right.